So right out the gate, I just gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie for a variety of different reasons. That isn't to say that it doesn't have its downsides, not at all. But the highs are high enough that it just helped carry me throughout the movie on just such a good note. And there were so many moments where I'd just be a little bit like smiling throughout it because I was just having such a genuinely good time. The character of Shang-Chi, or Shang-Chi, however you want to kind of pronounce that, I do appreciate the moment where he is telling Katie or Aquafina how to pronounce his name, like Shang-Chi. And she's even having a little bit of trouble with it because she's, I guess, second generation Asian immigrant kind of situation. So she's not as in touch with her culture as her parents and grandparents would like her to be. And I really do appreciate some of that stuff with Aquafina slash Katie and her family life and how, she's not living up to that standard that her family is trying to set and all that good stuff. It's very like millennial problems basically. But honestly, Shang-Chi and KT are at the heart of this series, whereas Shang-Chi brings the action, Katie slash Aquafina really brings the heart. And when Aquafina and Simu Liu are together in a lot of stuff, they're at their best. Like, seriously, never split these two up because they bring their A game when they're together. Because when you see Shang-Chi and his daily life, going through his routines in San Francisco, living it up with Katie, visiting various friends, going to karaoke bars, I'm like thinking throughout this whole thing, I would love to hang out with these guys. They seem like a lot of fun. And I relate to having a dead end job that you're just like, it's what I do to pay the bills. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. Would I rather be doing something else? Of course. But everything changes once the Ten Rings come for Shang-Chi, and we have this amazing action sequence on this bus. And you see most of it in the trailers, but there's just so many good little moments sprinkled in throughout here and there, because they mostly show off a lot of the stuff with Razor Fist, and not so much the mooks that are with him. I'm glad that they gave Razor Fist only one Razor Fist, because anything more than that, I would have been like, no, no, do not put those two Razor Fists away. One gets the message across just fine. And I'm surprised how much of a role Razor Fist actually had in this series as a bit of an enforcer for the Mandarin. And once Katie sees Shang-Chi throw down with these guys and just kicks all kinds of ass. And I love the fight on the bus. Like, it's so reminiscent of so much like Jackie Chan movies and like some of his movements and his techniques and how he's flipping and ducking and dodging all over the place. It is so fun. Definitely the best action scene in the movie, which is also kind of a disappointing thing. Not to say that the rest of the action sequences are bad, it's just that I would say that the battle on the bus has the less CGI swap outs for Shang-Chi, and I really appreciated that. Like, really seeing Simu Liu just throw down was a pleasure. And when Katie, asked him after the Ten Rings managed to grab this pendant of his that they had come after, he tells her most of his backstory that, his father is this man named Wen Wu, this conqueror who had gained these 10 rings, and we never fully get the explanation as to where the 10 rings came from, and that becomes a bit of a plot point towards the end of things, but I was really looking forward to learning the origin of these things, but we never hear it in this movie, and that is such a shame. I was like, ooh, give me that Mok Luan backstory, man. Space dragons, let's do it, let's go. Never get that. But, this guy, Wenwu, he became this conqueror thanks to these mystical rings, and I love the way they portray the 10 rings. Do they have all the magical abilities that they do in the comic books? No. But at the same time, man, these things are awesome. These things are so cool in how they're wielded. Not to mention, they're also kind of wielded like actual rings used in Shiny's martial art. But he was this conqueror for like 1,000 years. And it was only like 30 or so years ago that he was going to conquer this mystical city because Asian cultures, there's always some mystical hidden city. But he was trying to find this mystical city through this bamboo thicket, but he ends up being veered off course because it's not some place you easily get to. And he ends up coming upon this guardian named Ying Li. And I love the fight that they have because at first it's a desperate battle, invader versus guardian, and they're having these awesome movements and all that. And I love the way they portray the differences between the martial arts of Ying Li and Wenwu. Ying Li uses more fluid movements and all that good stuff. Kind of like, honestly, it's basically like an airbender movements, or even the circular movements of a waterbender. Flow like water, but at the same time, you push your enemy away. You don't use rough movements and all that. You just constantly are taking them off guard, getting them off their stance and stuff like that. Whereas Wenwu's are more like firebender, earthbender techniques, very hard, rough strikes, all about forcefulness and power and all of that. And she's managing to dip, duck, and dodge around it at every turn. And then they start kind of digging on each other while they're fighting. And I am so for that scene because it's just like, man, this got romantic real quick. And I'm just like, yes, yes. But Tony Leung really brings it with the character of the Mandarin. It is just such a solid portrayal because they end up falling in love, getting together, but unfortunately he's never allowed within the Hidden City because of his background as a conqueror who has just this empire that expands the whole globe and all that good stuff. So it's understandable, and they're not really wronged by it. They just go off and start a family. But Ying Li ends up losing all of her mystical powers, a lot of that stuff. But for the most part, they're content because they end up having a son and then a daughter, Jialing. I think it's Jialing. And for the most part, most of their lives, they're raised in a very loving family and a loving environment. But unfortunately, the Mandarin's past comes up to haunt him as these guys looking to get revenge on Wenwu come calling. But Wenwu is away. It's only Ying Li, Shang-Chi, and Jialing there. And, Ying Li tells her children to hide as she takes on these men. And that moment, there's this moment where at first it's just a handful of guys, and without her power she still has her martial arts, so it's like, okay, she might be able to take them. And then more guys start flooding in, and it's just like, well, damn. So she beats down plenty of them, but ultimately she is killed within the battle. Shang-Chi ends up seeing the whole thing, her fall. He's crying over her body when their dad gets home, and he swears vengeance. He tries to go off and find the man who was leading the charge on all this. The scene when young Shang-Chi is with his father and they go to this gambling parlor, and Shang-Chi points out the assassins, the men who killed his mother, and then Wenwu just goes off. It is insanity, and I love that scene as he convinces his son to come in and help him destroy their enemies. And so he's trained for years, and especially by one enforcer of Wenwu called Death Dealer, who's just this constantly masked figure. And he's a brutal trainer too, but Shang-Chi is trained, he's brought up, he's developed for about 7 years or so, and then he's sent off to kill the man who killed his mom. Now, initially, as he's telling this story to Katie Aquafina, he says that he did not kill the man who was responsible for the murder of his mother. And it's so obvious that's a lie. It's very obvious that's a lie. And he even admits it later down the line, after some time, that he did kill the man, which is the backstory of Shang-Chi. Although they really flip around a lot of things. But I do love how they combine the stories of both the Mandarin and, Fu Manchu, as both of these characters, men of great power, were said to have lived long lives and mystical backgrounds and all this. They both primarily initially had a son and a daughter, and Shang-Chi is kind of a combination of the character of Shang-Chi as well as the Mandarin son Temujin, who would follow in his father's footsteps. But Shang-Chi just goes about his regular backstory, goes off to kill a man. He does end up killing the man, but whereas in the comics, he was brought to find out that where he was told this person deserved it, he finds out the person didn't. And his father was the one who was evil and dirty and all that good stuff. In the movie, Shang-Chi is just completely taken aback by what he did. He felt shame, he felt disgust, and I like how they spun it where he's not completely in the blame for what he did. He was still a young boy, and this was the man responsible for the death of his mother, so you can understand a lot of stuff there. In the comics, it's just some guy he was sent out to kill, and he was fairly older at that point. Basically, how old Shang-Chi is here is at the age now. So Shang goes off, he runs away, and he basically goes into hiding for years on end, for around 10 years or so. And as he was attending high school, he met Katie. They have been friends ever since. That's why they have such a wonderful chemistry. And he had received a postcard from his sister, who he basically left at the compound to live out her days with her father because he never went back. And as they travel to China, I believe, they end up at this underground fighting ring, which is where the postcard was sent from. And that's where you see Wong versus the Abomination. And initially I'm just like, okay, they're like bitter enemies, but no, apparently Wong knows the Abomination, who now looks more like the Abomination than you would have thought. And apparently he's been training him as well, which I'm very interested on their backstory there. And why Wong is just out there fighting in underground fighting tournaments. Maybe that's how he earns money for the Sanctum Sanctorum. So that, Mr. Sorcerer Supreme can just keep Sorcerer Supreming it up and screwing with the multiverse and stuff like that. But that was a fun scene. But he ends up, accidentally, Shang-Chi ends up actually fighting in the tournament against his sister, who kicks his ass because she thought he would be returning when they were kids, back after about 3 days of him being off to, take care of their mother's killer. But 3 days turned into 6 years, and when she realized he wasn't coming back, she went off to do her own thing. And also, she was never trained by their father, so a lot of her skills was self-taught. She had to be on the come up on her own way, which is very reminiscent of her character in the comics, but she's an amalgamation of various different characters because in the comics, Fu Manchu had a daughter as well, but she wasn't as given as much importance as Shang-Chi. But as well as the Mandarin, he also had a daughter, Sasha Hammer, because the Mandarin married the daughter of Justin Hammer, and they had a child as well. And she's also, and Xialing is very reminiscent of her too, because Sasha Hammer is very business savvy and stuff like that. So, and even in the comics recently, they introduced someone who is very reminiscent of the way that Xialing looks in this movie, especially when she gets her dragon scale armor. And I'm not going to try to say their Chinese name, but her alias is Sister Dagger. But you also have another character named Sister Hammer, who basically has the origin of Xialing in this story, where she was never given the same training as Shang-Chi and was often very much punished in place of her brother, so they have this bitter rivalry. So it's so funny how you basically merge two characters and then split them off into two characters once again. But she's running this underground empire since she was just like, well, if my father won't give me if I can't have my father's empire, I'll just create my own. Hashtag girl boss. But she does really resent her brother, and that's when you discover that she was not the one who sent the postcard. This was basically a way of distracting her so that the Ten Rings could just get in and try to take her pendant as well. Apparently, you need the two pendants in order to infiltrate their mother's city. So we get this cool fight scene as they're all trying to escape. At first, Xialing isn't trying to help her. She even leaves them for dead, but she comes back, helps out. We get this awesome action moment on these bamboo scaffoldings and all this. I just wish it was better lit in a lot of places so I could see more of it. That was my only gripe there. But ultimately, as all the action is going down, Death Dealer comes in and manages to steal Xialing's pendant. And, Death Dealer and Shang-Chi get into this action scene, and it's just like, it's obvious it's about to be like payback for all the brutal training he received as a child, and I love this action scene. It was real cathartic, and I would have loved to see it truly just go down solidly. But then in comes Wenwu, just stopping the whole fight in order to get the pendant. He brings everyone back to his compound. He tries to, talk everyone down, basically. And he feeds them the story that he's been hearing the voice of their mother calling to him from beyond the walls of the hidden city from which she's from. He believes that she's been locked away. And Shang and Xialing are just like, no, she died. How is that possible? But Wenwu fully believes it. He tells his kids, get on board or get out of the way, and even has them locked up when it doesn't seem like they're on board with his mission of infiltrating the city, and if they don't free her, just burning the city to the ground, which is that is the Mandarin way. Also love that he does give an explanation to Katie Aquafina about the whole situation of, I've gained this so much power that the Americans tried to use me as a boogeyman and this, that, and the other, but they didn't even get my name right. They called me the Orange or something like that. I love that moment. That was very cute. Very tongue-in-cheek situation. But as Shang-Chi, Xialing, and Katie are locked up, they end up finding this passageway that takes them to none other than Trevor Slattery, the original Mandarin, original, from Iron Man 3, played by Ben Kingsley. And apparently, after the short Long Live the King, All Hail the King, where he's put at gunpoint by an assassin for the Mandarin, he was actually captured, brought over, was set to be executed, but then he started putting on this performance, and apparently the men of the Ten Rings ate it up, and so he was just kind of kept around as a court jester of sorts. And, Trevor managed to get clean from all the drugs he was doing, but he also ends up befriending this mythical creature from Shang-Chi's mother's hidden city called Morris, and it is the most adorable thing possible, and he's the only one who can understand the creature. And once they manage to break out in this fun action sequence, but again, it's very darkly lit in a lot of places. I'm just like, man, I wish I could see this a little bit more clearly. But they manage to escape. Morris ends up helping to lead them to the hidden city because, initially, Wenwu says you can only get there once every something or other years, like most hidden cities. But, this little mythical creature, Morris, was able to help lead them through the way to actually get there if you take a specific path. And Morris is this little six-legged, faceless creature with four wings called a Hundun, and that's about all I know of the creature. It's small, cute, fluffy, and expect plenty of plushies out of it. But they're led to the city. They try to get there and warn the people. As they enter, you see all these cool mythical creatures like a nine-tailed foxes and kirins, and I'm just like, isn't that Japanese mythology? Then again, there's a lot of overlap in some places, so it's hard to say. But they arrive there. They actually end up meeting their mother's sister, played by Michelle Yeoh, which is like her second part in the MCU, because she was Alita Ogord in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but who knows if that character is going to appear again. It plays the character of Ying Nan, who helps to, serve as a leader for this Hidden Cities community, the Hidden City of Ta Lao. And they arrive, they warn the people that trouble is coming, and Ying Nan explains that they kind of assume so, and tells the history of this city of Ta Lao. That originally the people there came from another dimension, and they would battle these interdimensional beings, the forces of this creature called the Dweller in Darkness, which I'm just like, oh shit, that the Dweller in Darkness, that's one of the Fear Lords from Marvel Comics. That's also pretty awesome. But instead of feasting on fear like in the comics, he feasts on souls. Your soul is mine. I love it when he sucks out their souls. And the best way to defeat the Dweller in Darkness was with dragon scales. And the dragon scales come from this creature called the Great Protector, or Shenlong, which is, a giant mythical dragon, basically. Thing looks like freaking Falcor in a lot of scenes, but that the dragon helped to push it back, seal it behind this gate, and that's what Wenwu has been hearing called to him. Not Shang-Chi's mother, but it is the Dweller in Darkness trying to get Wenwu to free him. So we get this training montage to prepare. Katie ends up training with a bow and arrow and actually shows a bit of proficiency with it. Honestly, there were so many scenes where Awkwafina was looking gorgeous in this movie. Like, absolutely fantastic. And I thought Awkwafina's character would be a bit annoying or come off as too comedy relief in this, but no, she played a lot of scenes very seriously and as seriously as she needed to, and it was like very solid direction for the character, like A+ work from Awkwafina. The character Xialing, she ends up embracing her ways of combat and really throwing down, because this Ta Lao embraces, all combatants, equal opportunity ass kicking. Don't matter if you're man or woman, you can throw the fuck down. Whereas Shang-Chi ends up training with Ying Nan in the ways of his mother, and how she was able to best Wenwu, teaching him softer stances and all that. But, she tries to convince him to combine a lot of that because he is both his mother and his father. Take both and make it into your own. So eventually Wenwu's forces infiltrate the hidden city, get this big old CGI battle, which was very unfortunate because I wasn't digging in as much as I would have liked to, because you lose a lot of the martial artsness. Honestly, when it wasn't stuff with the 10 rings being used by the Mandarin, I was kind of like checking out, in and out here and there, but the Mandarin does manage to blast back Shang-Chi into this nearby lake as he goes in order to, open up the gate. Shang-Chi ends up floating to the bottom of this place, ends up encountering Shenlong just down there chilling out. Shenlong awakens. We get some never-ending story as Shang-Chi is just riding on the back of Shenlong as, the Mandarin Wenwu is just opening this gate, freeing out the minions of the Dweller in Darkness so that they can bring back souls. And the first person to die is Death Dealer, and I was so disappointed because I'm just like, no, I wanted to see Shang-Chi throw down with Death Dealer. But once all these minions of the Dweller of Darkness start stealing people's souls, and the only thing that can defeat them is dragon scales, which the people of Ta Lao have, the 10 rings change sides quickly, so we were never really going to get that final bit of catharticism of seeing watching Shang-Chi beat down the Death Dealer, which was really the biggest shame of this movie. Because Death Dealer was like what I would have loved to have really seen from Taskmaster, but man, it's just like, dang it, he killed another really cool character. But Shang-Chi has this final confrontation with his father Wenwu, and man, they really play up so much of the sympathy of Wenwu. Like, Tony Leung just really brings it, because you really sympathize with this character. Like, solidly one of the better MCU villains. And you even get moments where Shang-Chi starts to overpower Wenwu and take the 10 rings from him. At first he just gets 5, and they start battling against each other there, where Shang-Chi starts using the 5 rings that he gets in a different way from Wenwu, and it's honestly pretty awesome. Like, this is the first, like, real solid, we are the same but opposite kind of throwdown that I've seen in a good hot minute. And even when Shang-Chi starts to gain the upper hand because he had decided that he would kill his father, and he even managed to take all 10 rings, he ultimately decides against it, just wanting his father to just come around and come back to him. Unfortunately, he doesn't get this chance as the Dweller in Darkness manages to escape thanks to the efforts that Wenwu did before. Wenwu ends up captured, gets his soul completely sucked away, but at the last minute he gets a moment of redemption as he sends over all 10 rings to his son, basically passing it on to him, and gives his son one last smile before he passes on. It's a very sweet and kind of heartbreaking moment. Then we get into like the real CGI fest, because the Dweller in Darkness is just sucking out souls left and right. Although I love how, the Shenlong, the Great Protector Dragon, ended up kind of teaming up with Xialing for a little bit, because honestly, Xialing, she doesn't get enough to do. Mang Zhen just does not get enough screen time, and I'm just like, no, hashtag girl boss. But she really does play an equal part to Shang-Chi within the finale, as she's doing her best to help out both Shang-Chi and the Great Protector, Shenlong. But Shenlong ends up being captured by the Dweller in Darkness, and it starts to suck out his soul. But Katie Awkwafina gets in this lucky shot with an arrow, manages to knock the Dweller in Darkness back a little bit so that Shenlong can be freed, and Shang-Chi is able to go in with the 10 rings and send it into the Dweller in Darkness and just use its power to just overload the creature, using the abilities of both his mother and his father to overload the creature and just blow him up from the inside out. And thus, the day and the world is saved, thanks to Shang-Chi, KT, and Xialing. And afterwards, we see that, Shang-Chi, meets up with some friends that both he and Katie have. They're talking about what happened afterwards. Xialing was supposed to dismantle their father's operation, but honestly, she just takes it over and starts running the 10 rings. Again, hashtag girl boss. And I kind of saw that coming to a certain degree, because it's just like, yeah, of course she took it over. It's not like Shang-Chi wanted it. So she turns the 10 rings into her organization, although whether or not it's going to be at all reminiscent of the way the 10 rings were before is anyone's guess. But Shang-Chi and Katie end up being called upon by Wong, who wants to analyze the 10 rings and find out what they are. Even brings in, Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner. They're not certain, but they know that the rings are giving off a signal of some sort. To what, no one knows. But they basically tell Shang-Chi to keep in touch, and that they're now part of a bigger universe and all that good stuff. And we end things off with the Shang-Chi, Katie, and Wong going to karaoke. And it's absolutely fantastic. Honestly, Wong in this movie was great. I thought he was going to have just this minor role. And yet, he was solidly throughout the entire movie. And I'm just like, yes, get it, Wong. Get it, Wong. So, dude, if you can't tell from the fact that I was able to just summarize this entire movie, like not even a summary, just talk at nauseum about this entire movie, I dug the shit out of it. I really did. Did it kind of lose me in a little bit of places? A little bit. There were some times when Simu Liu wasn't really doing it for me, but then Aquafina would just bring it in the ways that he wasn't bringing it. Mang Zhen really deserved a little bit more characterization outside of angry younger sister. And if there's a sequel, I would love to see more of it, but there's definitely gotta be a sequel. Like, straight up, there has to be a sequel. And honestly speaking, I would love it if it was something like Shang-Chi and the Hidden Cities, or Shang-Chi and the Iron Fist. Like something like that. Like, I need Iron Fist in some one of like a follow-up to this. Like, do Iron Fist justice finally. Because the biggest problem with the Iron Fist Netflix series was the fact that, Finn Jones, the actor, just wasn't good at kung fu. Like, aside from the fact that I know a lot of people wish the character was Asian, I can understand that, but that wasn't the deal breaker for me. It was just the fact that the kung fu in that series was weak. And this movie, it fired on all cylinders when it was just doing the kung fu. So I would love to see more solid kung fu here and bring in the Iron Fist, get your mystical stuff here and there, but kind of downplay it a little bit. Just, more martial arts, and then with a little bit of the CGI glow fest up in there. But seriously, that feels like a solid direction for this, because you've introduced the idea of hidden cities, other dimensions, all that good stuff. And with the Iron Fist, I know it sounds redundant, but the Iron Fist had situations where there were tournaments of these other dimensional cities in China and all that. Like, it wasn't just a singular thing. There are multiple other dimensional cities in Marvel based around Chinese myth, and they have tournaments and they meet up every once in a while and this, that, and the other. And I would love to see that incorporated into the MCU. That is a great place to go with all of this. So please, 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 Shang-Chi sequel that brings in the Iron Fist. I need it. I need it. I need it. And more of Shang-Chi wielding the Ten Ring. These things are so cool. I hope they don't end up going away at some point, because what they did with these 10 rings, I would love to see them in the comics, honestly. Because they're different enough from the 10 rings in the comics that you could create an entirely new kind of 10 ring system, and it would be amazing. What they did with these characters was solid, interesting, and it really is a lot of the stuff that makes you love the MCU. So A minus B plus at worst. Some really good stuff, kind of brought down by some hokey CGI in a few places, but honestly not the worst. I got over it well enough. It's just that if anyone were to really rag on the CGI, I could not blame them. I could not blame. But let me know your thoughts on this movie in the comment section below. Who was your favorite character? What was your favorite scene? Let me know all that good stuff. And if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. And until next time, I've been Deuce Disden, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.